pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now, here's your host, Mac Payne.
This is Mac Payne here with episode 1740 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran. One of my favorite things to do on this podcast is to extol the virtues of individual members of the Vietnam veteran generation, one as great as any that ever heeded the call of duty from its country. When we came home from Vietnam, we were older, wiser, stronger, and better able to deal with adversities than our non-Vietnam veteran contemporaries. It's quite easy to find members of that great generation to talk about because they're everywhere. They've spent the last 50 years since we came home from Vietnam verifying the statement that that generation was as great as any that ever heeded the call of duty from its country. I point that out by highlighting individual members of that generation, and it's quite easy to do because there are so many of them out there who reflect the high values of that great bunch of Americans who went to Vietnam, served their country under difficult and demanding circumstances, came home to a rude and unfriendly welcome home by those stupid, misguided anti-war demonstrators. Despite that, they went on to continue serving their country in a wide array of civilian and military pursuits. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about one of those tremendous representatives of that generation. He lives out in Los Angeles, California. His name is Al Moreno. He went to Vietnam, came home, and became a street cop in the tough neighborhoods of Los Angeles, and then he wrote a book about it, titled LA's Last Street Cop. Naturally, that book is on the recommended reading list for this podcast. I recommend you get a copy of it. It's a great book. If you go over to the podcast website, VietnamVeteranNews.com, check out episode 1740. There you will find a handy link where you can click on it and be reading that book in no time. I highly advise you to get a copy of it. It tells the story of a great American and a great Vietnam veteran. When you hear and read his story, it makes you proud to be a Vietnam veteran, knowing there are people like Al Moreno amongst us all. Al recently put out a press release about his new book. I'm going to share that press release with you about Al and his life and how it was shaped. The title of the press release is Patriot Shaped by War to Become Heroic Cop Reveals His Inspiring Story in a New Book. Let's take a look at what Al has to say about his book. Dateline, Los Angeles, California. A half-century ago, a young high school dropout with several arrests, a boy turning man who grew up in a broken, impoverished home with 11 siblings in a bad neighborhood, and who as a child needed braces just to walk, joined the Marines to straighten his life out and serve his nation proudly during the Vietnam War. He exercised some ghost over there. His dad was convicted of being a deserter in another war. When he returned, he knew what he wanted to become. Al Moreno had to overcome all types of obstacles to become a rookie cop at age 29. He went on to become a highly honored hero in his 7-year stint with the Los Angeles Police Department. He has owned and run a successful private security company for the past 35 years. He is also the author of a powerful new book in LA's Last Street Cop. In his insightful and story-filled book that reads like a Hollywood film, Moreno reveals the honor, courage, strength, and conviction needed to carry out a job that puts his life and the lives of others on the line every day. Now get this. He learned from his military service what it means to be a patriot, to serve and protect, and to defend the American dream. Let me read that to you again about his service in the Marine Corps. He learned from his military service in the Marines what it means to be a patriot, to serve and protect, and to defend the American dream. Hear, hear, Al Moreno. My wartime experiences helped prepare me for policing American streets and taught me about the discipline, hard work, and determination needed to survive, says Moreno. It also taught me about the sanctity of life. He was one of 3 Moreno family members that enlisted in the military service. The Moreno family had warriors in Vietnam from 1967 to 1971, he says. My brothers, Art and Tony, were 11 Bravos in the Army Infantry, and both were awarded Purple Hearts and Bronze Stars for valor. Tony was wounded and nearly died from his wounds. Moreno earned a reputation as a cop who bent over backwards to avoid deadly police shootings, even when the interactions with the bad guys would have justified such actions. Lethal violence is a last resort tactic, says Moreno. We want to stop crime and bring people to justice. Indeed, Moreno believes that police officers don't always get the respect and praise they deserve, nor do soldiers. He hopes that this coming Memorial Day, all citizens will pause to honor the heroism and sacrifice of those who fought to defend our nation abroad and within the streets. That was Al's press release about his new book. He put out a website about that book, laststreetcop.com. I advise you to go over and take a look at it. There will also be a link to that website over at the podcast website in episode 1740. I'm going to read to you just a little bit about this book. This is what John C. Dvorak said about it. Probably the most entertaining and chilling police tale you'll read this year. This gripping memoir vividly accounts Al Moreno's rise as a gifted and fearless Los Angeles police officer, surviving gangs and homicidal situations in the gritty 1970s urban war zones as he strove to achieve his personal and professional dreams. Packed with unforgettable scenes of both beauty and despair, it culminates in his vocal stand against corruption within the LAPD and the political retribution that ensued. A dirty internal investigation that unleashed the murderous vendetta of a violent ex-cop from the Aryan Brotherhood. The book includes these gripping first-person accounts, living on the edge to protest the public, in the line of fire each and every day, confronting upper police management who cooked the books on crime stats and got away with it, observing gang violence from the inside out, avoiding the use of lethal force in life and death situations, becoming the hunted in the crosshairs of a white Aryan murderer, seeking to clear his name after getting fired from a corrupt police investigation. Those are just some of the things that'll be in that book. Do yourself a favor. Go over to the podcast website, VietnamVeteranNews.com, check out episode 1740, and get a copy of Al Moreno's book, LA's Last Street Cop. It'll probably become a movie someday. Wouldn't doubt it at all. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. This is Mac Payne closing out episode 1740 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. I thank you very much for coming to listen to these stories on this podcast. You are cordially invited to come again soon and often to listen to more of these stories that will be coming to you on the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?